My name is Tracy Haywood. I'm 32 years old, and this is the night my family decided I was disposable. I didn't plan on moving back into my parents' house at 32 with a 3-year-old and a box of clothes that still smelled like the life I'd lost, but plans have a way of cracking quietly. One layoff turned into 2 months of scattered interviews and daycare spreadsheets that never lined up with reality. I told myself it would be temporary. 2 months, 3 at most. Save some money, find a rhythm, breathe. Mom hugged me at the door. Dad carried in Ethan's car seat like it weighed nothing. My sister Monica stood in the hallway with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You're lucky, Tracy," she said on the first night, pointing at the casserole Mom pulled from the oven. "Some people don't get room service." She called it a joke. I let it slide because letting things slide was the only way to fit in a house already packed with lives. Monica and her husband had moved back after a bad appraisal and a few greedy contractors, which meant they'd overspent and underplanned. The house groaned with 3 calendars, 2 marriages, one of them mine to survival, and one small boy who woke at dawn. We tried to be quiet. I cleaned as if quiet could be polished into the floors. Monica loved to talk numbers loudly enough for me to hear. Interest rates, emergency funds, the little stash Dad keeps for just in case. She'd say it lightly at dinner, tapping the rim of her glass. "Gotta have your rainy day envelope, right, Dad?" She liked watching Dad nod, like she'd handed him the idea. I learned to stare at my plate and count Ethan's peas. 6, then 4, after he hid 2 in his fist. The resentment didn't need words. It lived in the doorway when I came back from interviews, in the way Monica lowered her voice when I entered a room, in the tiny sighs that meant I'd taken up too much space. I told myself it would pass. I told myself to be useful. When Mom's back ached, I did the laundry. When Dad's truck needed washing, I went outside with a bucket and a prayer that competence could be a language they remembered. 2 months into temporary, the morning started ordinary. Pancakes. Burned edges for me. Perfect circles for Ethan. I took him to the park after breakfast so I wouldn't be underfoot, pushing him on the swing until my shoulders softened and his giggles cut the air like little bells. We came home before dinner, the sky folding into gray. The front door was half open, the house too quiet. Mom was in the kitchen, her hands around a mug like it needed warming. She didn't look up. Dad walked out of the hallway holding a thick envelope by the corner, careful as if it were evidence. His face was not angry. I would have known how to meet anger. This was something colder. "What's going on?" I shifted Ethan to my hip. He dropped his head on my shoulder, tired and sticky. Dad lifted the envelope. "You stole from us," he said. His voice was even. "Get out of my house." For a second, the sentence didn't land. It floated in the space between us, waiting for gravity. I laughed because mishearing felt safer than understanding. "What?" Monica stepped into the doorway, arms crossed, mouth soft with sympathy that didn't touch her eyes. "I was looking for my hairbrush," she said, careful, theatrical. "In your dresser. I didn't mean to invade your privacy, Tracy, but I found Dad's emergency cash. All of it." She tilted her head at the envelope. Over 10,000. She almost smiled, and I realized I'd never learned what her smiles meant. My mouth was dry. "That isn't mine. I didn't touch it." Dad didn't ask a single question. He turned, walked into the spare room that had been ours, and came back with a black trash bag. He moved through our lives like they were items on a list. Ethan's dinosaur, my work shoes, the baby monitor I sometimes pretended still needed plugging in. He dumped them in the bag. The plastic crackled like a laugh in a quiet theater. "Dad," I said, "check the cameras. Do fingerprints. I'll go with you to the bank. I didn't—" "You always were the clever one," Monica murmured, voice pitched for Dad to hear. "Asking for time so you can do something with the money. It's classic." Mom still hadn't spoken. Her silence was a hand around my throat. I reached for her anyway. "Mom?" She blinked at her cup. "I can't do this right now." Something inside me tilted. I remembered the night before, when Monica had asked at dinner, light as foam, "So, how much is emergency money these days? 5? 10? Dad had laughed. Mom had told her to mind her business. Monica had smiled, filing away whatever she came for. "I didn't steal your money," I said to Dad. "I swear on Ethan's life." Dad's stare didn't flicker. "Get out," he said. Ethan began to cry because he understood tone even if he didn't know the script. I packed what I could, while Dad watched like a guard. The trash bag split when I lifted it. Ethan's stuffed bear fell out and rolled under the table. I didn't pick it up because my hands had turned to weather. At the door, Monica leaned her shoulder against the frame. "Good luck surviving, loser," she said softly, so only I could hear. "Might build character." We stepped into night. The air was cold enough to make honesty of breath. I stood on the sidewalk with a toddler on my hip, a torn bag at my feet, and $40 in my purse. My house key felt heavy on my ring, even though it meant nothing now. I thought of calling a friend. I thought of calling my ex, and then remembered why he was my ex. I thought of screaming. Instead, I walked to the bus stop and sat on the metal bench while Ethan rubbed his eyes against my shoulder. The bus came slow, then slower. By the time it sighed open, my arms had gone numb. In the flickering window, I saw myself, a woman who had not been believed by the people who taught her what belief was supposed to look like. The word thief floated over my reflection like a subtitle somebody else had chosen. I kissed Ethan's hair and pretended it steadied me. At the last stop, the driver cleared his throat politely. "End of the line. End of the line." It felt on the nose and unnecessarily accurate. I stood under a streetlight and tasted the hollow place where anger should have been. Anger is fuel. This was something colder, quieter, a kind of frost. There is a number you memorize because it belongs to family, and then there is a number you memorize because it belongs to rescue. Uncle Rick's number had always been both. He answered on the second ring. "Tracy?" The word broke me. I didn't have to explain the whole story in order. The words fell out, a handful of jagged pieces. Monica, envelope, Dad's voice like a locked door, Ethan's bear under the table. I heard my own breath hitch and hated it. "Come stay with me," he said, like he was offering a glass of water. No questions, no lecture about pride, just a place. He texted the gate code and an address that looked, on the screen, like a different life. We took 2 buses and a walk through a neighborhood where the driveways were wide and the hedges knew their place. The house at the end of the cul-de-sac glowed warm and quiet. The porch light made a neat square on the stone like a promise. Uncle Rick opened the door, saw Ethan's drooping head on my shoulder, and didn't ask anything at all. He reached out his arms. "Give me the boy. You're safe now." Safe. The word loosened something behind my ribs. I didn't cry out loud. The crying happened inside, a rain I didn't have to hide from anybody. He took the torn bag from my hand like it weighed nothing and set it down like it contained something worth keeping. He led us to the guest room with the soft blue lamp and the bed that looked like a decision. "Sleep," he said. "Everything else can wait." I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say I didn't do it. I wanted to say 1,000 things I couldn't afford. Instead, I tucked Ethan in and watched his mouth slacken, his lashes touch his cheeks. Children are proof that the world has not given up on softness. In the quiet, a thought came like a bird landing. If Monica wanted me gone, she'd pick the most efficient way. Not an argument that could be forgiven, not a mistake that could be corrected, an accusation that peeled me out of the family like old paint. She hadn't just aimed at me, she aimed at where I lived. Down the hall, I heard Rick in his office, his voice low. A door of sleep opened. I leaned through it and let it close behind me. Morning smelled like coffee and pancakes. Ethan spilled syrup and Rick didn't even blink. When I finished telling him everything, the little digs, the envelope, the way Dad didn't ask a single question, he rubbed his chin thoughtfully, eyes not unkind. "I've had a bad feeling about Monica's neatness around money since she was 17, he said. "Your parents have been loose with the business accounts, little withdrawals that don't line up. It's time for some light." He made a call while I stared at the steam rising from my cup. I didn't catch every word, but the shape of the conversation was a key turning. Freeze access. Suspend distributions. Start an audit. He hung up and met my eyes. "You don't have to prove anything, Tracy. Truth is a patient hammer. It lands when it's ready." I wanted to ask what that meant. Instead, I nodded because my voice didn't trust me yet. For the first time in months, afternoon came without dread attached. Ethan chased light across the garden. I folded laundry that belonged to a life where things could be folded neatly. I kept waiting for the ache to spike, to insist on being the only thing I could feel. It didn't. It lay down and watched me breathe. I thought about Dad's eyes. Not angry, cold. Cold decides. Cold doesn't listen. Cold is a door closing because the hinges have been oiled for this moment all along. That night, after Ethan fell asleep clutching a new toy Rick had slipped into his hand, I stood at the window and watched the porch light carve a perfect square again. It looked like a stage where someone might confess something. I didn't know it then, but karma had already started moving. I could feel the house settling around us, quiet and steady, like a lung waiting to exhale. Somewhere else, another house was shifting too, the one I'd been thrown from, only its settling sounded like cracks. The first morning at Uncle Rick's felt like waking up in a story that didn't belong to me yet. Sunlight crept across the pale curtains, soft and still. For the first time in months, there wasn't a slammed door, a sarcastic sigh, or Monica's heels clattering down the hall. Only the faint hum of a coffee maker and Ethan's tiny snores beside me. I watched him sleep, his fingers curled around the tail of his new stuffed dinosaur, the one Rick had bought him the night before without saying a word. Kids recover fast. They don't know how to stay broken for long. Adults, though, we rehearse the pain until it becomes a habit. When I walked into the kitchen, Rick was already there, flipping pancakes like he'd done it 100 times. His kitchen smelled like maple syrup and calm. "There's coffee," he said, nodding toward the mug waiting for me, "and you don't have to say anything yet." I sat. For a minute, I let the warmth of the cup steady my shaking hands. After breakfast, he waited until Ethan was outside chasing butterflies in the garden before he finally asked, "So, tell me what happened." I started from the beginning, how I'd lost my job, moved back home, Monica's constant jabs, the tension that never seemed to leave the air. Then the envelope, the accusation. The way Dad's voice had turned into something sharp enough to cut me out of the family with one sentence. I told him everything. Rick listened, like someone who'd already guessed the ending, but wanted to hear how the main character would tell it. When I finished, he leaned back, rubbed his chin, and said something that made my stomach drop. "I've been waiting for this." "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He stood, walked to the window, and watched Ethan running across the grass, the sunlight catching in his hair. "Your sister's always been careful," he said finally. "Careful about what she says, what she shows, but not careful enough." He turned back to me. "You know the family business? The contracting company your father and I inherited from Grandpa?" I nodded. "For the past year, I've noticed withdrawals that don't make sense. Petty cash signed under your father's name, but the handwriting wasn't his. I asked about it, and he brushed it off, said it was Mom paying bills, or Monica handling errands. I let it go." He poured himself another coffee, the kind of slow, deliberate movement that meant he was thinking through every word. "I shouldn't have." I stared at him. "You think Monica—" "I don't think. I know." His tone didn't rise, but it landed hard. "She's been siphoning small amounts through shell accounts, paying off personal loans. Your father's too distracted to see it. And now when that missing emergency fund appeared in your drawer..." He let the thought hang. "That wasn't an accident. That was cleanup." The words hit me like a cold wind. "So she planted it?" "Probably, but it doesn't matter what I think. The truth always leaves fingerprints." He took out his phone and dialed someone. I heard words like audit, freeze distributions, and suspend access. When he hung up, he looked at me with quiet certainty. "The storm's coming, Tracy. You just have to stay still." That afternoon, Rick had errands to run. He told me to rest, to let Ethan play, to not answer any calls from home. "They'll come crawling when things shift," he said, "and they will shift." I spent the day trying to feel normal. Ethan built towers out of wooden blocks in the sunroom while I folded laundry that wasn't mine. The house smelled like lemon polish and safety. But safety can be its own kind of silence, the kind that hums under your skin because you're waiting for the next crack of thunder. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself Rick was just trying to make me feel better, that he'd exaggerated to give me hope. But as I tucked Ethan in, I caught a glimpse of him in his study through the half-open door, talking on the phone again, his voice low and steady. The only words I caught were, "They won't see this coming." That night, I dreamed of the old house, the sound of Dad's voice echoing down the hall, Monica's smirk at the doorway. In the dream, I stood in front of the dresser, the envelope glowing faintly from the drawer like it was alive. When I touched it, it burned. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon and the sound of Ethan giggling downstairs. Rick was teaching him how to flip pancakes. For a few moments, I let the scene wash over me. Two people who didn't owe each other anything, just sharing small kindnesses like it was the easiest thing in the world. Later that day, while I was watering the garden, Rick came outside, sliding his sunglasses down. "You might want to pack a small bag," he said. My stomach tensed. "Why?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that meant trouble was about to find its balance. We're going for a drive. To where? Home. The words sliced the air. Rick, no, they made it clear. They made a mistake, he said calmly, and it's time they see who they chose to believe over their own daughter. He didn't give me time to argue. Within the hour, Ethan was strapped into his car seat, holding his dinosaur, and we were driving back toward the place I'd been thrown out of. Every mile felt like reopening a wound. Rick didn't speak much, but his silence had purpose. I could feel it, the same energy of someone about to end a long game. As we pulled into the old driveway, my pulse hammered. Monica's SUV was parked at an angle. Mom's car sat crooked near the mailbox. No sign of Dad's truck. The front door was slightly open, the curtains shifting in the wind. Rick put the car in park and turned to me. "Stay here with Ethan," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "This part isn't for you." "Rick." He was already out of the car, walking toward the house with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where the rot was. From the car, I couldn't see much, but I could hear everything. The door slammed, then shouting. Monica's voice, high, frantic, then Mom crying. Something fell, glass maybe, then silence. A moment later, Monica screamed, not words, just a sound. When Rick came back out, his expression hadn't changed. He opened the car door, slipped into the driver's seat, and started the engine like he'd just run an errand. "What happened?" I whispered. He didn't answer until we were halfway down the road. "The audit came through," he said. "Turns out Monica took company money to pay a personal debt. Then she planted the cash in your drawer to cover her tracks. Same amount, same envelope." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "She didn't just want you gone," he continued. "She wanted to bury her own mess. But the audit doesn't lie. They're cut off. No more company funds. No more dividends. No more playing with other people's money." I sat in silence, trying to breathe. All I could picture was the way Dad had looked at me, like I was nothing. Like his own daughter was capable of stealing from him. And now the truth was out, but I didn't feel victory, just a strange, quiet emptiness. Rick's hand tightened briefly on the steering wheel. "You don't need to do anything," he said. "Just wait. Truth hits harder when it lands late." Out the window, the sun was setting behind the trees, painting everything in orange light that looked almost holy. For the first time since the night I was thrown out, I let myself breathe without fear of what tomorrow might take. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Monica had always been the kind of person who fought even when she'd already lost, and something told me she wouldn't go down quietly. The drive back to Rick's house was silent, except for the steady rhythm of the tires and Ethan's soft humming in the back seat. I watched the trees blur by and wondered if I should feel relief, anger, or nothing at all. What I felt instead was exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you forget what peace is supposed to feel like. When we got home, Rick handed me his phone. Block numbers, private calls, don't answer any of them. If they need you, they know where to find you. I nodded, but curiosity gnawed at me. "What happened after you went inside?" He took off his sunglasses and placed them carefully on the table. "They were shocked. Your mom tried to defend Monica at first, but the numbers don't lie. Every cent she stole was documented. She used company funds to pay off her personal credit cards and a home renovation deposit. I had the accountant on speakerphone." I blinked. "And Dad?" Rick exhaled slowly. He didn't say much. When I told him the funds were frozen, he looked at Monica and said, "What have you done?" Then she lost it. Said it wasn't fair, said she deserved more after all the work she'd done for the family. I sank into the couch. She never worked a day in the company. Rick gave a quiet laugh, humorless, sharp. That didn't stop her from convincing herself she did. He paused, then added, "They're finished financially. No more access to company money. I've locked every account that isn't personally theirs. They'll have to live on what they actually earn now." It should have felt like justice. Instead, I just felt tired. "I don't want to see any of them," I whispered. Rick nodded. "You won't have to. Let them make the first move." For the next 2 days, I tried to focus on small things. I cooked breakfast, watered the garden, and took Ethan on long walks down the quiet street. Every time I passed a reflection, in a window, a car mirror, even the kettle, I barely recognized myself. The woman looking back at me was someone who'd been burned, but who somehow hadn't turned to ash. Still, I couldn't stop wondering how Monica was reacting. I imagined her pacing through that oversized house, blaming everyone but herself. I could see it, her scrolling through her phone, searching for someone to manipulate. By the third night, Rick came home later than usual. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened. He tossed his keys onto the counter. It's unraveling faster than I thought, he said. What is? The facade, he replied simply. The contractors working on your parents' house walked off the job. Monica's credit cards are maxed out, her husband's loan got denied, and the pool she bragged about online? Payment didn't clear. I stared at him wide-eyed. So it's all collapsing? He smiled faintly, piece by piece. That night, as Ethan slept, I scrolled through social media. Monica's page, once filled with bright selfies, home renovation updates, and captions about family loyalty, had gone quiet. No posts for 3 days, no comments, no curated happiness, just silence. But silence from her never lasted. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. 15 missed calls, all from my mother. One message blinked at the top. Please, Tracy, can we talk? Rick glanced at it and shook his head. Don't reply. I just want to know what she wants. She wants relief. And right now, you're the only person who can give it. Don't. He was right. I turned the phone face down and watched Ethan play with his blocks on the floor, stacking them carefully, only to knock them down and start again. The rhythm of destruction and rebuilding. Maybe that's what life really is. By evening, the calls stopped. The quiet that followed felt heavier than the noise had been. That same night, Rick came into the living room holding a thin folder. I think it's time you see this. Inside were printed sheets, numbers, transfers, dates, all showing withdrawals labeled as miscellaneous office expenses. The totals added up to more than $40,000. Monica's name doesn't appear, I said. Rick nodded. That's what makes it clever. She funneled it through an alias, but... He flipped to the last page. She used the same fake vendor name that showed up on her husband's side business filings last month. I blinked. So there's proof? He smiled. There's more than proof. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small USB drive. I didn't tell you this before, he said, but last year, when a family heirloom went missing, I installed a discreet security camera in the hallway by the bedrooms. I forgot it was even there, until now. He plugged the drive into his laptop and a grainy video appeared. The timestamp matched the night before I was accused. The image showed Monica walking down the hall, glancing both ways before stepping into my room. In her hand was the same envelope Dad had held. She opened my drawer, slipped it inside, and left. My breath caught. She really did it. Rick paused the video on her face. The look in her eyes wasn't guilt. It was calculation. She didn't just want you out, Rick said softly. She wanted to erase you. My voice trembled. What are you going to do with this? He leaned back. That depends on you. I could send it to your parents right now, or we wait. Let her panic first. Sometimes silence is the best punishment. I thought about it for a long time. The image of her planting that envelope burned behind my eyes. I wanted justice. I wanted an apology. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be thrown out like garbage. But then I looked at Ethan asleep on the couch, one arm around his toy dinosaur, peaceful and safe for the first time in months. Wait, I said finally. Let her sweat. Rick nodded, satisfied. Good. The next morning, everything started to fall apart, fast. Monica tried to authorize a transfer from a frozen account. It failed. Contractors began posting online about unpaid invoices. Her husband's company faced an audit. And then, late that night, Rick received a message from one of his business contacts. The local paper wants a comment about the Cole family finances. He didn't respond. He just smiled. The truth's growing legs. I wasn't ready for what came next. At midnight, my phone lit up again. Monica calling. 6 times in a row. Then a voicemail from her husband. Family should stick together. Things got out of hand. Let's talk before it's too late. Too late, I thought. Way too late. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was already speaking for me, louder than any revenge ever could. That night, Rick made dinner, pasta and garlic bread. We didn't mention the chaos outside our walls. He just asked Ethan, "How many dinosaurs do you know now?" and listened while my son counted with proud little giggles. For the first time, I realized that peace isn't quiet because there's nothing left. It's quiet because you finally stopped fighting for what was never yours to begin with. But deep down, I knew Monica wasn't done. She never stayed silent this long. And whatever she was planning next, it wouldn't be pretty. By Thursday morning, the quiet felt wrong. It wasn't the peace of resolution. It was the silence that comes before a storm remembers your address. Even Ethan, usually up by sunrise, slept late. The house felt still, like it was holding its breath. I poured coffee and sat by the kitchen window, watching mist roll over Rick's garden. The phone on the counter buzzed again. Another message from Mom. No, I'm sorry. No mention of Monica. Just, we need to talk, please. Rick walked in, crisp and composed as always. He glanced at my phone, then at me. She'll keep trying until guilt feels like courage, he said. I set the phone down. I'm tired of waiting for them to remember I exist. He nodded. Then maybe it's time they see themselves for who they are. A few hours later, Rick came back from his office holding a thick envelope. I've been thinking, he said, sliding it across the table. You deserve to know everything. Inside were printed pages, audit reports, screenshots, statements, proof of everything Monica had done. But there was more. He reached into his jacket and placed a small photo still on the table, the paused frame from the security footage. Monica, frozen mid-step, slipping the envelope into my drawer. Do you want me to send this to them? He asked. I stared at the picture. For months, I had carried the weight of being the family disappointment, the thief, the burden, the failure, and here was the truth in black and white. Part of me wanted to blast it everywhere, post it, send it to every relative who'd ever believed Monica's perfect act nonsense. But another part of me, the part that had cried quietly on Rick's doorstep, didn't want any more noise. No, I said softly. Let her sweat. Rick smiled faintly. Exactly what I hoped you'd say. The next few days were a slow unraveling. First, Dad's credit card got declined at a local hardware store. Then, word spread that the family company had been locked from new bids pending a review. The contractors at my parents' renovation stopped showing up. The half-finished pool Monica bragged about on social media turned into a muddy pit. Every time I opened my phone, there was another ripple, another small reminder that karma had better aim than I ever could. By Sunday, the silence broke. The doorbell rang just past noon. Rick looked up from his laptop. Don't answer it. Through the window, I saw her, Monica. Hair unbrushed, face pale, eyes red. Her perfect composure was gone. She pressed the bell again. Tracy, please. I didn't move. Rick opened the door himself. Monica's voice cracked the moment she saw him. You ruined everything. He didn't even flinch. No, Monica, you did that yourself. She pushed past him and turned to me. I didn't know it would go this far. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, arms crossed. You didn't know Dad would throw me out? Her eyes glistened. I just wanted you gone, Tracy. You show up and suddenly Mom and Dad are cooking for you, helping you, acting like you're the victim again. I was tired of it, tired of being the backup daughter. Her words came out like fire, uncontrolled and bitter. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch you fail and still get sympathy? I worked for everything I had, and you stole for it, Rick interrupted, his tone calm, cutting. She turned on him. You think you're so righteous, sitting up here with your money and your rules. You've always judged me. Rick didn't raise his voice. He just placed the printed still frame from the footage on the table between them. Monica froze. Her eyes flicked to the photo, her face, her hand, the envelope. You had this the whole time? She whispered. Rick nodded. We waited, not for revenge, for you to reveal yourself. The air went still. Ethan's laughter from the backyard drifted faintly through the glass door, bright and innocent, a cruel contrast to the wreckage in the room. Monica sank into the chair, shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, she muttered. I didn't think it would ruin everything. It didn't, I said quietly. You did. She looked up at me with tearful eyes, searching for a way back to the version of herself that people forgave. What do you want from me, Tracy? I shook my head. Nothing. Not your apology, not your money, not your excuses. You didn't just frame me. You made me question my worth. But I found it again. And it's not something you can take. Rick's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and sighed. That would be your mother. She says your father's been blaming everyone else. She also says the audit findings are spreading among the shareholders. Monica pressed her palms against her eyes. It's all falling apart. Rick folded the paper back into the envelope and said evenly, That's what happens when you build your life on lies. She stood shaky and small. You win, she whispered. I looked her in the eye. There was never a game, Monica, just consequences. She opened her mouth like she might argue, or maybe beg, but no sound came. Then she turned and walked out the door without another word. When the gate clicked shut, Rick exhaled. And there it is, the confession. I sank into the couch, my hands trembling. So what now? He shrugged. Now she learns what life looks like without your family name to hide behind. And you, he smiled softly, you start over. That night, I tucked Ethan into bed and watched him drift to sleep. I felt something shift inside me. Not vengeance, not satisfaction, but release. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the woman who'd been thrown out. I felt like the woman who'd walked away. But peace doesn't stay quiet for long. The next evening, Mom called Rick. Her voice cracked through the speaker. She hasn't spoken to anyone. Your father's furious. The board's asking questions. Please, can we all meet for dinner? Just once, as a family. Rick covered the phone's mic and looked at me. You don't have to go. I hesitated, my pulse steady but heavy. No, I said finally. I do. But this time, it'll be on my terms. The invitation came folded inside a plain white envelope. No return address, just my name in Mom's handwriting. Inside was a note written in the soft, pleading tone I knew too well. Please, Tracy, dinner, tomorrow night, just us. We need to talk. I stared at the letter for a long time, not out of curiosity, but disbelief. After everything, they still wanted to pretend this was just a talk. Rick read it once and handed it back. You don't owe them anything, he said. I know, I replied, but I owe myself closure. He gave a slow nod. Then go. But don't walk in looking for an apology. Walk in knowing who you are. The next evening, I dressed simply. Dark jeans, a cream sweater, nothing that said, I'm trying. Rick offered to come, but I told him to stay with Ethan. This one's mine, I said. Driving back to the old house felt surreal. The closer I got, the smaller everything looked. The trees, the porch, even the windows. It wasn't the same home I left. It was a hollow replica. The renovation Monica had started was frozen mid-dream. Half-painted walls, a pile of unused tiles by the steps, the fancy new pool she'd bragged about had turned into a crater filled with rainwater and rotting leaves. I took a deep breath and knocked. Mom opened the door. She looked older, eyes red, makeup uneven. Tracy, she whispered, as though the name itself might shatter something fragile. Inside, the dining table was set like a stage. Dad sat at the head, jaw tight. Monica was beside him, hair pulled back, face pale. Her husband sat stiffly, pretending to belong. Aunt Sheila, Dad's sister, was there too, eyes darting between everyone, like she'd walked into a funeral no one wanted to admit was happening. No one spoke as I sat down. The silence was thick enough to taste. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. Thank you for coming. I owe you an apology. Her hands shook slightly as she folded her napkin. We believed the wrong person. I let pride and fear blind me. I'm so sorry, Tracy. Her voice cracked on my name. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the woman who had turned away in the kitchen that night, but someone smaller, broken by her own choices. Before I could respond, Monica stood. She didn't look at me, just at her hands on the table. It was me, she said quietly. I took the money. I planted it. I lied. The words hung in the air, raw and real. Aunt Sheila's eyes widened. Dad didn't move. Monica swallowed hard. I told myself I was just getting even, that you were always the favorite, the one who got the sympathy, the attention, the help. I was tired of feeling invisible. But I didn't mean for Dad to throw you out. I just wanted... She trailed off, her voice trembling. I don't even know what I wanted anymore. The silence that followed was almost merciful. Aunt Sheila finally broke it. And now? She asked softly. Monica's shoulders sank. Now everything's gone. The company money, the house, my husband's job. It's all falling apart, and I know I deserve it. Dad leaned forward, rubbing his temples. I don't know how to fix any of this, he muttered. Then, after a pause, he looked at me. But I want you to come home, Tracy. Let's start over. The words should have meant something. They didn't. I met his eyes, calm and steady. Home? I repeated. You threw me out into the street with my child, Dad. You believed a lie because it was easier than facing the truth. There's no starting over. There's moving on, and I already have. Mom started crying. We just want our family back. I sighed softly. Family isn't a word you can rebuild with apologies. It's what you protect when it matters. And when it mattered, none of you protected me. Monica's lip trembled. Can you ever forgive me? I hesitated. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Monica. It's deciding that your mistakes won't control me anymore. But no, I can't forget, and I'm not coming back. Dad pushed back his chair, frustration flickering across his face. We're still your parents. I know, I said, but that doesn't mean I owe you my peace. I stood. The chair's legs scraped against the tile, echoing in the unfinished room. Thank you for dinner, I said simply. I hope you find what you're looking for. No one tried to stop me. As I walked towards the door, Mom whispered, Tracy, please. But her voice broke before my name could finish. Outside, the night air felt clean, honest. I looked back once. Through the dining room window, I saw them sitting there, still frozen in that heavy silence, like a photograph of regret. When I reached the car, I finally exhaled. For the first time, I realized they needed me more than I ever needed them. When I got home, Ethan was already asleep in Rick's arms on the couch. Rick looked up as I entered. How was dinner? I smiled faintly. Quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after the storm's already passed. He nodded once. Then it's over. Almost, I said. Because forgiveness is one thing, but freedom is earned. The morning after the dinner felt different. Lighter, quieter, and impossibly still. The storm that had lived inside my chest for months had finally burned itself out. When I stepped into the kitchen, sunlight streamed through the windows, spilling across the countertops like a quiet promise. Rick was already there, coffee in hand, reading the paper. He didn't ask how I slept. He just looked up and said, You look done fighting. I am, I said and meant it. Ethan came running in a moment later, still in his pajamas, waving a crayon drawing. Mommy, it's our new house. He'd drawn a little cottage with big windows, a blue sky, and a garden full of scribbled flowers. There were 2 stick figures, me and him, holding hands in front of it, and above us, in bold toddler letters, he'd written, Home. Rick smiled when he saw it. That's actually not far off, he said, sliding a folder across the counter. I've been meaning to give you this. Inside was a lease agreement for his guest house. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, sunlight through skylights, and a fenced garden perfect for Ethan. Rent-free for 1 year. I can't accept this, I said immediately. Yes, you can, Rick replied, because I've seen you survive on scraps, Tracy. You deserve space to breathe, to build something that's yours. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Not the broken kind, the grateful kind that comes when someone sees your worth without you having to prove it. 3 weeks later, Ethan and I moved into the guest house. It wasn't big, but it was bright, alive, and ours. We painted the walls soft yellow and bought a second-hand couch that squeaked when you sat down too fast. Every morning, sunlight spilled across the floorboards, and Ethan's laughter filled the air like music. I started working remotely. A small design contract that grew into something steady. The routine became simple but peaceful. Breakfast together, work calls, afternoon walks, bedtime stories. Every small moment was a quiet act of rebuilding. Sometimes, after Ethan fell asleep, I'd sit by the window and think about the house I'd left behind, the one where my name had been turned into an accusation. I heard through a mutual friend that the renovations had stopped completely. The contractors refused to return. My parents were struggling with bills, too proud to ask for help. Monica and her husband had separated. She'd moved back into a small apartment near downtown, her social media gone dark. And me? I didn't feel revenge, just distance. The kind that protects you, not punishes them. One Sunday, Rick knocked on my door with a soft smile and a box of pastries. You've done it, he said. Done what? Stopped surviving, started living. I laughed quietly. Took me long enough. He leaned against the doorway. Sometimes freedom doesn't come with a bang. Sometimes it's just the sound of peace in your own home. That night, I drove out alone. The road wound past the old neighborhood, the one I'd been too afraid to return to. I slowed as I approached the house that used to be mine. It looked smaller now, half finished, half forgotten. Weeds had overtaken the yard, and the once proud fence leaned slightly, weathered and gray. Ethan's voice echoed in my head. Mommy, it's our new house. I smiled. For a moment, I thought about stopping, knocking, saying something that might close the circle, but some circles don't need closing. They need letting go. So I just sat there for a few seconds, watching the porch light flicker. Then, from the back seat, Ethan stirred awake. Mommy, he mumbled sleepily, who lives there now? I looked at the house one last time and smiled softly. Just some people we used to know. He nodded, satisfied, and fell back asleep. I drove on, the night stretching open ahead of me, wide, quiet, and full of possibility. I didn't get revenge, I got freedom.